Coming up on Philosophy Talk, social reality.
There is a question in philosophy, how does the world hang together?
What is a social reality?
Money, property, government, and marriage, they only exist because we think they exist, and yet they're objective.
What's the difference between a social reality and a shared illusion?
There's a fictional element in the creation of social reality, but it's not all fiction. Under special circumstances, you create a reality by representing it as existing.
Our guest is famed Berkeley philosopher John Searle.
The key question is this: how is it possible that we human beings construct an objective reality that only is what it is because that's what we think it is?
Recorded in front of a live audience at the Marsh Theater in Berkeley, California.
I'm a philosopher. I like to know how it really works.
Social reality, coming up on Philosophy Talk. This is Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything.
Except your intelligence. I'm John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor. Today we're recording the program in front of a live audience in Berkeley at the Marsh Theater, the Bay Area's breeding ground for new performance.
Our thinking originates at Philosopher's Corner on the Stanford campus.
Welcome, all you golden bears, to Philosophy Talk. Our topic today, social realities.
Can social realities surround us? Think of cocktail parties, football games, bar mitzvahs, political rallies. Think of clubs, universities. Think of cities, states, even nations. They are all social realities.
You know, both parts of that phrase, the social part and the reality part, are worth focusing on, John. Let's focus on the reality part. All the things you just mentioned, they aren't figments of anyone's imagination. They're real, really real, objectively real.
Well, yes, but still they're sort of made up, Ken. I mean, cocktail parties exist only because a group of people get together and say, this isn't just a group of people, this is a party. People just sort of decide that things exist, and then they do. It's sort of magic.
Well, it's not magic, but it is puzzling. I mean, because at bottom, social realities are just creations of the human mind. I mean, not individual minds, but collections of minds. You can't all by your little lonesome create a social reality. Try it. Try to make yourself the king of Pupatanya. If you try that, you've just created a figment of your own imagination. But put a bunch of people together, let them exercise their imaginations together, let them agree, and presto changeo, you've got a new reality, a new social reality.
Pupatanya?
Well, you know.
Okay, now that really does sound like magic, Ken. I mean, if one mind can't do it, why would two or three minds do any better?
Well, because social realities are founded on agreement. If a bunch of humans agree to create a club, well, then there is a club. If a bunch of humans agree to form a nation, well, then there exists a nation. And although they're nothing but products of human agreement, they're still not figments of our imagination. They are as objectively real as rocks and mountains.
Well, they're pretty important. We're immersed in a universe of ever-changing social realities, and they play an immense role in determining how we live and how well we live.
Well, right. Think of our earliest forebears. Their social reality consisted on their foraging on the savannah and being huddled in caves. Civilizations have risen and fallen since then, and with them ways of life have come and gone. And now throughout these massive changes in the social world, the biological and physical worlds have changed too, but not nearly as radically, and mostly in ways that are more or less direct consequences of changes in the human social world.
Well, you're right. I mean, think of how profoundly barren the world would be without philosophy departments. But I suppose they're just social realities. The social world affects not only the way humans relate to one another, but also how we relate to the more physical parts of the world, the biological world and the physical world. Science is really just a complex social undertaking by which humans collectively seek using realities like labs and universities and foundations to understand the physical, biological, and even the social world itself.
A scientific understanding of the social world. Now, that's an interesting thing. That sounds like sociology or anthropology or maybe social psychology. Well, we're philosophers. Why should we worry about the social world?
Well, first, because there's this metaphysical question, just how real is it? And secondly, because we want to understand, how does it arise out of the natural world?
Well, wait a minute. We started out by saying that social realities are creations of the human mind. Doesn't that suggest that the social world doesn't arise out of the natural world at all?
Well, maybe to a kind of mystic like yourself, but to a hard-nosed person like myself, I believe human beings are ultimately part of the natural world. The power of the human mind to create social realities has its roots in human psychology. Human psychology has its roots in human biology, and biology has its roots in physics.
Gosh, John, you're such a reductionist. We started out talking about the power of the human mind to create, almost out of nothing, all varieties of social realities, and now you're suggesting that it all comes down to the chemical processes of the brain?
Well, it's got to come from somewhere. It's not just magic. And it's not just human either. Even animals have some limited power to create social realities. Think of ant colonies and the hunts and quests they go on.
Well, there's certainly a lot to think about here, John, and I suspect that we're not going to make much progress unless we get some help.
But we've got the perfect person for that. Berkeley's very own John Searle, author of Making the Social World.
And since Philosophy Talk is itself a social reality, we want the help of our listeners here at the March to help enhance that social reality. So step up to the microphones on either side of the theater to join us.
But first, our roving philosophical reporter, Zoe Corneli, files this report.
Socially constructed realities are all around us, even in popular culture. Buffy the Vampire Slayer learned a lesson about the concept in the episode Life Cereal.
This is going to be great.
On the TV show, she goes back to school with her friend Willow, but the class is a little over her head.
Social construction of reality. Who can tell me what that is? Rachel.
A concept involving a couple of opposing theories, one stressing the externality and independence of social reality from individuals.
Good. And who can expand on that? Chuck.
Well, those on the latter side of the theoretical divide stress that social
I'm not
reality
following
is
this too well.
constructed in
Oh, the trick is to get in the rhythm.
Willow.
Because social phenomena don't have unproblematic objective existences. They have to be interpreted and given meanings by those who encounter them.
Buffy may not get it, but Willow has a point. We often create our own realities based on the communities we're a part of.
A group used to be something different. We were connected by geography and family and that sort of thing.
Satirist Merle Kessler is fascinated by group behavior. You may know him as Ian Scholes, the 60-second philosopher.
With the telephone, radio, movies, we became more separate. And with the internet, I think, it gave rise to groups that come out of our own little fetishes and obsessions and shared likes and dislikes that we formerly had to keep to ourselves, and now we find there's a whole community out there that shares them with us.
Kessler has followed a collection of interesting and unusual communities. One is an offshoot of fundamentalist Christianity. It's called the Quiverful movement. The name comes from Psalm 127.
As arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth. Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them.
The idea is to have as many children as possible. And it's very patriarchal, and they've got their own little business called Vision Forum, where they sell toys and inspirational books. So it's kind of like the Amazon of patriarchy.
Then on the other end of the spectrum,
there's a group, it's a porn group, frankly, of about 500 people, and they're into watching women in high heels stomp on toy cars. Now, how do these people find each other?
Kessler says what these groups have in common is members who have created their own collective realities. And there are many more groups, ranging from the sinister to the friendly to the weird.
You go to Yahoo, there's all these groups, chat rooms, people that get together from anything from Irish folk dancing to Arabic wind instruments. You'll find a group of people willing to share those interests and swap tapes.
And according to Kessler, there's nothing wrong with that. It stems from the desire to belong.
These kinds of things are healthy, I think, unless you're, want to start a sociopath club or something like that. But, people have their own personality traits, and I think it's good to know that you're not alone, so you're not, I'm wrong. There's something terribly wrong with me. Oh, no, I'm not. There's another person who's like this. Oh, there's 50 of us. Oh, there's 1,000. Let's start an army. Or a chat group.
For Philosophy Talk, I'm Zoe Corneli.
I'm John Perry, along with Ken Taylor. You're listening to Philosophy Talk. We're coming to you from the Marsh Theater in Berkeley.
And we're joined now by John Searle. He's an eminent professor of philosophy from UC Berkeley. He's author of many, many things, including The Construction of Social Reality and recently, Making the Social World, The Structure of Human Civilization. John, welcome back to Philosophy Talk.
Thank you. Thank you. Great to be here.
John, over the course of your long and distinguished career, you've written and thought about some of the biggest, most challenging issues in philosophy: intentionality, consciousness, freedom, speech acts, just to name a few. So how does your work on social reality fit in with all this other stuff you've done?
Yeah. Well, basically, all the books I've written are really part of one big book. There is an overriding question in philosophy, and that is, how does the world hang together? How does money, property, government, and marriage relates to thoughts and feelings, and how do they relate to biology and evolution, and how do they relate to physics? So the big question is, to put it very simply, how do you get from protons to presidents, from electrons to elections? How is it possible that we human beings construct an objective reality that only is what it is because that's what we think it is? So there are two parts, an answer to your question. One is, everything hangs together in a way that we need to show. But secondly, there's a special paradox we need to resolve, and that is institutional reality of money, property, government, and marriage. They only exist because we think they exist, and yet they're objective. This stuff in my pocket, it's really money. That's an objective fact. How can it be if it's just a matter of human agreement? That's the question I was trying to answer in this book.
Okay, so I'm going to reread your 20 books with this unity in mind.
Okay, but read fast, because I'm working on two more.
Okay. But now, just with respect to social reality, Ken and I were discussing the many forms of social reality. Is there an underlying unity beneath all this diversity?
There is. I think we're not smart enough to use a whole lot of different gimmicks to create a social reality. But if you're talking about institutional reality, where you have cocktail parties and universities and governments and private property and marriage, there's a single device we use, and not surprisingly, it's a form of speech act. We represent things as existing, and thus, under special circumstances, you can create a reality by representing it as existing. Money is created by a certain kind of a set of speech acts, but that doesn't just represent the piece of paper as money, it makes it money.
So it's like we say, let there be money, and there is money, and we've spoken truly because we've made it true.
Exactly
but you
right.
used a phrase I want you to clarify. You talked about institutions. That sounds like the Federal Reserve. But then you referred to cocktail parties. What institutions are there with cocktail parties?
No, whenever you have an established procedure for doing something, you have a set of expectations. These may be heavily formalized, like the Congress of the United States, or there may be the most informal thing, a practice of having a beer party on Friday night. In both cases, people have sets of expectations, and those expectations are not just suppositions that something's likely to happen. They think they're entitled to things happening. And to say that is to say that there's a certain structure to the creation of those entities, and I need a word for that. I call those entities institutions, even though that goes beyond the ordinary meaning of the word. But whenever you get a situation where you can make something the case by representing it as being the case, I call that an institutional fact.
Well, my expectations for the Senate are always very low, and for beer parties are always very high.
There you are.
This is a special edition of Philosophy Talk, coming to you from the Marsh Theater in Berkeley, California. We're discussing social reality with John Searle, author of Making the Social World.
In our next segment, we're going to dig deeper into just where the power comes to create social reality. And we'll compare and contrast social reality in the animal kingdom with social reality in human life.
Where does social reality come from? Plus questions from our live audience when Philosophy Talk continues.
Welcome back to Philosophy Talk. We're talking about things that are real and how humans can bring them into existence as if by magic. I'm John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor, and we're discussing social reality with John Searle, author of Making the Social World, The Structure of Human Civilization.
Human beings are not the only social animals. Birds, bees, dogs, and monkeys also create social realities. What distinguishes the human social world from the social world of other animals? What mental powers enable us to create such a variety of social worlds, large and small? And how has the social world changed so radically over the course of human existence? You, audience here, you can join us by stepping up to one of the microphones on either side of the stage.
So, John, I want to go back to something John Perry just said in passing. Look, you said, social realities are the things that we make so by declaring that they're so, and then we speak truly. Animals live in social worlds, but they don't declare them, they just live in them. So what's the difference between animal social life and human social life?
The big deal about human beings is we have a kind of language that, as far as I know, doesn't exist outside of our species. Other species have signaling systems. Some of these are quite elaborate. We know about the bee language and the vervet monkeys, and all these species have ways of communicating. But human beings have a remarkable capacity to create things by representing them as existing. Now, this is a special case of something that humans share with other animals, namely the ability to assign functions to objects. So the beavers can construct a beaver dam, and the birds make a bird's nest. And human beings also have that capacity to make tools. And there are various tools that we see in front of us, like chairs and tables. But humans have this remarkable ability to create functions that can only be performed because there is a collective recognition on the part of the members of the community that the person or object has a status, and with that status, a function that goes with it. And that's where you get money and property and presence of the United States. They're assigned a status.
Let's back up, though. I think you're onto something deep and important. Human beings are what I call status-conferring creatures, right? We confer status on all sorts of things, a proliferation of different statuses. But animals do this. To think of the alpha male, the alpha chimp, right? The other chimps recognize in a certain sense. I mean, they may not have a concept of alpha in their brains, but somehow they're oriented toward the alpha chimp in this alpha chimp way. So when the alpha chimp wants to eat, everybody else backs off. When the alpha chimp wants to have sex, everybody else backs off. So it's like there is some kind of ability like that in a chimp to confer status and to recognize status and for it to shape their shared life.
Well, if everybody backs off, the alpha chimp is going to have trouble having sex.
Right. All the competitors back off.
Now, there's a special thing about human beings that the alpha male or the alpha female in a primate tribe does not have, and that is the creation of status functions in human beings, if they're collectively recognized, give the members of the community reasons for acting that are independent of their inclinations, because they create obligations, rights, duties, permissions, authorizations, and authority of various kinds. Now, the alpha male, he's got a problem. Tomorrow morning, there may be another challenger for the position of alpha male, and if that guy can beat him up, he's out of a job as alpha male. Whereas Barack Obama, he's going to be alpha male tomorrow morning, and the fact that I might beat him in arm wrestling, or we might all be able to take him down if we ganged up on him, it doesn't matter, because human beings create what I call deontic powers. With the status function goes a set of powers, rights, duties, obligations, authorizations, and permission, and animals, as far as we know, don't have that.
I don't disagree with, but I want to probe it a little more, sort of exactly what this power consists in. I don't think it consists in just our having language. You could imagine a set of people who had these powers to declare these things, but it's more, it has something to, look, my dog, I can train my dog to not eat things off the floor, right? I give it a signal, and when I'm around, and when I give it the signal, it knows the command, leave it. Right? I've trained my dog to leave it. But if I turn my back or go away and there's food in the house, the dog is going to eat the thing. Because there's something it seems not to do. It never internalizes the rule, I am not going to eat stuff off the floor. It can be conditioned not to do that in certain circumstances, but it doesn't internalize a rule. Human beings seem to have something more than language, this ability to govern their lives by rules that they internalize.
Well, that's right. Now, that's what I'm calling the deontic powers. Human beings recognize obligations, authorizations, permissions, and authority, and power structures of various kinds that give them reasons for acting that are independent of their immediate inclinations. Now, as far as I know, that's a distinctive human trait, and it requires language. Why?
Yeah,
because
why?
the facts only exist if they're represented as existing. That object in the street is my car. Now, what fact about it makes it my car? Now, it's not a chemical or physical fact about its structure, but it's about a structure of institutionality that gives me rights that are recognized where that car is concerned. But now, and this is the key point about language, which animals don't have, and that is the form of the existence of those sorts of powers, the rights, duties, and obligations and responsibilities, they only exist if they're represented as existing, and you have to have a language to do that.
But they only exist if they're represented as existing. Suppose I represent myself as having the right to John's coat here.
Yeah.
I just did that.
Yeah.
I represented myself as having the right to, you said only if. Do they exist if they're represented as existing?
I said only if, but not if and only
Right,
if.
I know.
Because there are all kinds of things that I'd love to represent to myself as existing, but they don't. It doesn't work. You have to get other people to accept it. And now, I think the mechanisms we're describing are the key to understanding revolutions and social change. So, for example, what you described as happening with John's coat happened to a bunch of men in Philadelphia in 1776. They got together and declared themselves a separate country. Now, that's an amazing thing. There's nothing in the British Constitution that says a bunch of the king's subjects in a British Crown colony can just declare themselves to be a country. But they did it, and they got away with it. Now, that's where they had another institution that helped, an army. And the army. But the army's another set of institutions. So they had one institution they created, the United States of America, and they were aided in that creation by the army that they created, and they got away with it because they managed to defeat another army. And by the way, something Americans tend to forget, they couldn't have done it without help from the French, another institutional structure. So you get all these institutions that create and destroy other institutions.
Let me try out an idea on you. Take just the language about an existing thing. So I talk about John Searle. Now, I've got the representation of John Searle, but there's also the reality of John Searle. Now, let's suppose in some sad day in the future, you die, pass away, you're not there anymore. We can still talk about you. There we've got the representation. The reality's not there anymore. There's historical representations that we can match up to. And finally, maybe somebody invents a philosopher even more remarkable than you, a fictional philosopher, just the representation. And yet, that philosopher could have a fan club, he could have a program, so forth. Mm-hmm. So is that final step, the step we get in art with fiction, is that analogous to the social creation of reality?
Well,
just the representation does the job without the reality?
There's a fictional element in the creation of social reality, but it's not all fiction. And the reason is there actually have to be agents that can bear the powers that we are creating. So if you decide we're going to have a fictional Joe Blow and he's going to be a famous philosopher or whatever you want to make him, well, that's a great fictional story and it may be an effective fictional device. But if you're talking about actual powers of human beings, nobody acquires a power as a result of that. Whereas if you become a professor at Stanford or a professor in Berkeley, you have a set of powers, rights, duties, and obligations.
I noticed that. I became brilliant the moment I got tenure.
Well, congratulations. I noticed a decline in my intelligence level.
You're listening to Philosophy Talk. We're talking about social reality with John Searle, author of Making the Social World. We'd love to have questions from our live audience. Step up to the microphone and join in the conversation right over there, sir. What's your name and what's your question?
My name's Jeff from San Francisco. And I just wanted to challenge this idea here. So the Americans became the Americans when they sort of collectively decided to do it, and sort of describing this as something that is distinct from what would be possible in an animal kingdom, but I think one could imagine sort of a wolf pack that fractured in a similar way and, urinated over its spot and collectively sort of this had a consensus of a way to behave based on that fact, and even adding, some additional complexity of the French, you could say, so an additional wolf pack somehow had another territory that also had an added complexity to the interaction. Certainly people are more complex in the nature of their society, but I don't see how the essential point is owned by people in that example.
It's a little known fact that all of the signers of the Declaration went out and urinated around Independence Hall.
That's why it's a sacred spot. But the answer to the question is that the wolf packs might do this, but the remarkable thing about humans is they're capable of acting in a way that's independent of their inclinations. Somebody invites me to go down to downtown Berkeley on a Sunday afternoon when it'd be a great day to be outdoors, but he wants me to participate in a radio program, and guess what? I came here, and the reason is I made a promise. And my doggy, he's a wonderful doggy. He doesn't make promises. He doesn't have to worry about his promises and what he's going to do next Wednesday afternoon, or whether or not he's got conflicting obligations, or will he get his income tax on time this year, because those kinds of structures, you have to have a certain kind of language. Now, let me say one last thought, though, and that is when I contrast humans and animals, I'm not trying to make a plea for our superiority as a species. You know, if it turns out that animals also have income tax and divorce courts, well, welcome to the club, okay? What I'm trying to cite some special features. If it turns out that some other animals have them, well, good luck.
Well, and I also think look, animals have a kind of sociality, and it's worth exploring sociality in the animal kingdom. But I think human sociality is built on a set of capacities that are refinements, articulations, expansions of that, and the distinctive forms of human social life are because our capacities are radically more articulated, and moreover, I think, you know, wolf packs maybe have changed since evolutionary time, but look at the radical way in which human social organization changed, and that's partly because they're sites of contestation, because your representations of the reality and my representations of the reality may be different, and we fight over them, and, you know, all this stuff, but we've got lots of questioners lined up there. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, sir.
Hi, my name is Rodrigo. I'm from San Francisco. I remember reading years ago Searle's book, The Construction of Social Reality. Found it very refreshing, but I couldn't help but notice that in the Buffy clip, the professor speaks of the social construction of reality, which is a rearrangement of words, which I am reminded is also the title of a famous sociology book in the 60s, giving us an alternative view of all of this. So I wonder to what extent your ideas are in conflict, or maybe a revision, or a stark alternative to the sociological
Took the question
story.
right. We wanted you to distinguish.
I'm grateful for that question. I find the idea that reality is a social construct not just false, but it's repulsive and disgusting. Why? Because it gives us a kind of power we don't have. We can't make galaxies and molecules and tectonic plates. Reality is not a social construct, and if there are books that disagree with me on that, I'm prepared to debate them. But there's a little corner of reality which has money and property and cocktail parties and radio programs. That is a social construct, and I'm interested in that because it's where our life is, and much of our life is. So I'm contrasting my view, which is that there is a reality that is socially constructed, but I'm contrasting that with the idea that all of reality is somehow there because we think it's there, and that I think is nonsense.
I agree with you that it's tending toward the nonsensical, but let's try something. So one of the ways in which we have of knowing reality, the mind-independent reality, is through these complex social things like science, which has its own internal, socially constructed, let's call them standards of evidence and argument and all that, so that somehow the social organization of our cognition affects how we, and if you might think, I don't think, but you might think that if we had organized ourselves differently, then reality as we cognize it would strike us differently.
Yeah, I agree with everything up to that last sentence. Of course, you got to have a big social apparatus to do science. To discover that hydrogen atoms have one electron, you got to have a team. You got to have a lot of people that know what they're doing, and you got to have all kinds of apparatus. But hydrogen atoms don't give a damn about us. Once they got one electron, they're going to have one. They had it before there were any humans, and they'll have it after we quit talking about them. So the reality that exists independently of human representation is just there. It takes an institutional structure to get at it, but that's an unfortunate fact about our limitations. I can find out I got one nose without professional help, right? I don't need any assistance. But to find out that hydrogen atoms got one electron, I need help. But that's an accident of our existence. It's just not metaphysically important.
But now somebody might say, well, you know, reality is reality, and then there is this corner of social reality. But there's this intermediate thing, and often the entry into that is identity. I mean, take a concept of a person. What makes us count a single human life as a person? Locke, who was a very realistic guy, said, well, that's a forensic concept. It has to do with attribution of responsibility and wealth. It's really part of this other thing. So in a way, or another example is the Stanford Stadium. They told the alumni they were rebuilding the old stadium. They told the sports writers they were giving them a new stadium, right? Now, I don't think the world makes one correct, but one or the other they'll decide it was a new stadium or an old stadium. So with the identity of things, now maybe not in any way their ultimate reality, but what counts as a single thing, isn't there an overlap between the social construction of reality and the construction of social reality?
Yeah, there are all kinds of interesting marginal cases. Is it really the same stadium? Notre Dame had a bigger problem than Stanford did because there are lots of alumni who insisted that their seats had to remain in any rebuilt stadium. So they had all kinds of architectural nightmares that they had to put up within their new stadium. The key question is this. Are there deontic powers that attach to the concept? That is, are there powers like rights and duties and obligations that go with the concept? Now, for a human being, if you're going to prove you're John Searle in a fair fight, you're going to have rights and duties and obligations. And that means that you're going to have to get acceptance. Just looking like me isn't going to be enough.
You're listening to Philosophy Talk. We're discussing social reality with John Searle, author of Making the Social World.
In our next segment, we're going to peer into the future. Technology has given us new tools for forming and reforming social structures. What new realities come with these? Where are we headed? What will the structure of the social world of the future be like? We're coming to you from the Marsh Theater in Berkeley, the Bay Area's breeding ground for new performance.
The social world to come, plus more questions from our live audience when Philosophy Talk continues.
Welcome back to the program. Are we living a life of illusion? We're talking about social realities. I'm John Perry. This is Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything
except your intelligence. I'm Ken Taylor. Our guest is John Searle, author of Making the Social World. And we've got lots of questions here from our live audience in the Marsh. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Doni, and I'm from the South Bay. And my question is regarding how social realities change. I completely agree with the way you describe social reality, but obviously throughout history, humans have organized themselves in various different ways of organizing their societies. So the question is, how do social realities change over time, and why do some social realities become dominant and becomes the reality versus other versions?
No question that there are massive changes. Think of the change in the social status of women in the past century, and it's remarkable, the change. My mother graduated from medical school and became a doctor, a medical doctor in 1930. Now think about what it was like to be a young doctor, a woman doctor in 1930. Now half the people graduated from medical school are women. Okay, so there are remarkable social changes. Now I wouldn't try to give you a single sentence summary of the nature of social change, but one thing that drives it is that people are unwilling to accept an existing social order. They become unwilling to accept the existing sort of status functions, as I call them, that they've been assigned. Now, there's a remarkable fact about human history over the past couple of centuries, and that is that the dominant social institution was the nation state. A Martian anthropologist would think we were crazy that we put our main loyalty to these countries that combine nationhood and statehood. But people will die. I will die for the United States of America in a way that I won't die for Alameda County, right? I mean, I'm lots closer to Alameda County. But the fact is, I won't fight and die if somebody says, come on, we're all going to fight and die for Alameda County. Forget it. I'll stay home.
I think, look, I want to add on to this, though, because I think let's call it the plasticity of human social life as compared to animal social life, which is not nearly as plastic, has something deep to do with the nature of the human consciousness and self. I tell my students, look, a human self is given only as a problem and a project, not something that's already settled, right? So for a human being, the question, who am I to be? What norms am I to live by? Who am I to ally with? Is always given as a problem and a project. And in the answering of that, I mean, people throw up answers to you, say, you're going to live as this. And you have the capacity to say, oh, hell no, I'm not, or okay, yes, or whatever. And because of that, there's all this kind of back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And social representations are sites of contestation always for human beings. And that gives rise to a kind of plasticity that I don't think there's anything like it in the animal world.
But I mean, Alameda County, that's kind of, I mean, who would care about Alameda County?
Oh,
but
a
how
lot of
about
people do.
California? Couldn't you get
No,
behind
I
California?
think, only to the extent
We wanted to
I regard
secede from
California as a kind of nation state. I mean, people do think, a lot of people do think of California that way. And maybe, well, right now, maybe we'd be worse off, but there may have been times when we'd be better off having the country of California rather than this larger unity.
Yeah. Let's take some more questions from our live on this side of the auditory.
I'm Georgie from San Francisco, and a related question to the social change is these institutions that are real, how do we set boundaries for what's real and levels of reality when people can have conflicting views of them? I'm thinking of things like marriage, heaven and hell. Is there a hierarchy of real realities here, and how do we determine them?
No, I think, again, that's an excellent question. The key question for me for the existence of a social institution is to what extent does it generate the kind of powers that I've been talking about, where people, as a result of their relationship to the institution, have rights, duties, and responsibilities. Now, the point you're making is that institutions may fluctuate as they are evaluated, and we're constantly in a situation with our institutions where we got to say, is this a good way to do it? Is this the right way to run a university? Is this the right way to run the state of California or the institution of marriage? And they change as a result. So marriage and universities and nation states continue to evolve under all sorts of pressures, but among those pressures are the collective intentionality of the members. Is this the right way to do it? Is this a good way to do it?
So I want to put a question to you. I don't know what you think of existentialism, but a Sartrean question kind of posed up to me. Look, here's one thing that we're liable to do with these institutions. We're liable to think that they're being endowed with deontic powers, as you call it, is somehow independent of us. Yeah. Tradition, God, the code impersonal voice of reason. The existentialist says, no, it's all in you. It's all you conferring status upon these things, and you either have to own up to it or not own up to it. What's your view about that?
Institutions, unfortunately, often work best when people are unaware that it is just an institution, when it seems like it's part of nature or something that God ordained. In my childhood, there were many people who thought it's only really money because it's backed by the gold in Fort Knox. I hope nobody thinks that anymore. And I've been told when lecturing in Italy, please don't give marriage as an example. Marriage is not a social creation, according to the Catholic Church. So there are all kinds of institutions that work best if people don't think they're institutions. I'm a philosopher. I like to know how it really works. And it's true. That may sometimes cut into the efficiency of the operation of the institution. But efficiency is often an excuse for injustice.
So do you think there's anything to, say, the Kantian idea that there are normative authorities that are independent of, well, Kant thinks they're somehow rooted in our will. The Christian idea that there are normative authorities, deontic authorities that are independent of our will. Is there anything to that idea?
My next book will be about ethics, and we can explore that in more detail. But the point is, I don't think you discover ethical truths by sort of looking very hard through your ethical telescope, but I do think rationality sets constraints. And rationality sets constraints on what is ethically acceptable and what is ethically required. So the discovery, we're not going to discover an ethical realm the way we discover a new continent, but we are going to have we're going to have rational constraints on our ethical judgments.
Let's let another member of our live audience join the social reality. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, sir.
Thank you. My name's Joshua. I'm from right here in Berkeley. And my question is about Kurt Vonnegut. And in his book, Cat's Cradle, he deals with social constructs and calls them a Karass. I don't know why he calls them that, but he refers to, at one point, there's a long discussion of a false Karass or a false social construct, and I think the example he gives is Hoosiers, because it's just random and doesn't actually describe any commonality. But he doesn't really go into what is a real Karass or a quote-unquote real social construct, but in the example from earlier, as technology has enabled disparate communities of people who say like to watch women in high heels smash trucks, we can all laugh because we sort of sense that that's a false or not a real social construct, but maybe people who like to watch men tackle each other wearing Raiders jerseys in Oakland is somehow a valid or real construct. And I'm just wondering if you can comment on that.
Yeah. Well, that's really several questions. I'm sort of fascinated by, I want to see these heels that they use to smash trucks, or I'd like to see the trucks that they use, but that's sort of physical interest that I have. It's not really a social reality problem. But the point, however, is that, and it was a point we were hinting at earlier, and that is, it's a form of bad faith to just take the institution for granted. You ought to be constantly thinking about, is it a just institution? Is it the right way to organize institutional structures? Are the power relations that we've assigned justly assigned? Now, one of the things I like about the United States is that we tend to take democracy for granted, and we have these absurd, logically absurd, but pretty effective devices. So when you get a problem you can't resolve, well, the Supreme Court decides. So some guy, there's a tie in the election, so they can't say, well, the election ended in a tie, but the Supreme Court decided, okay, Bush is the president. And it's true, it's pretty hard to justify that. On the other hand, he got away with it because the institution is accepted. There were a few bumper stickers in Berkeley that said, he's not my president, but I don't think they worried about that in the White House, I can tell you. Because people would, the institution continues to function, and it's a pretty good institution.
So, John, we've established you're kind of, with nation states, you're a little conflicted. You'd fight and die for the United States, but you think it's a pretty bizarre way to organize the world. Nowadays, we have something bigger than nation states. We have these transnational corporations.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of things smaller than nation states, not just Alameda County that you don't care about, but universities, which you probably do care about, the American Philosophical Society, and the group of people who likes to see women smash trucks.
And we have things like Al-Qaeda, which cut across national boundaries.
So how do you see this developing in the 21st century?
Yeah, well, I left my crystal ball at home, and I never bring it to downtown Berkeley anyhow. It's not safe. But I think we're going to see some interesting changes, and one is, oddly enough, the increase in smaller locuses of loyalty and identification. So the British have discovered not that their citizenry is so eager to become Europeans, but they're very anxious to insist that we're Scottish and it's our oil, or we're Welsh, and we've got to try and revive the Welsh language. So with the increased power that comes from the communicative capacities, the internet, and also with a certain kind of economic security, we're in a sort of downward blip of the economic security right now, but in the long haul, we got more money than our great-grandparents did. So you're going to get more fluctuating focuses of identification and community.
I think that's right, but I also think the ability of people around the world to organize themselves in like-minded communities has increased. So you get these things that are larger but not nations. And I do think transnational corporations are destroying the nation because you can't really regulate within the boundaries of the United States a transnational corporation. You can try, but it can just move sources of productions around, and they can get money capital from over here and over there. And
I think from outside, the transnational corporation looks pretty powerful. But if you're actually in one in the middle of a downturn, you're in General Motors, let's say, in bad times, it doesn't look so secure
I
and
think
solid.
that's true, too. We've got one last questioner over here. Welcome to Philosophy Talk. You'll be our last question.
Hi, my name is Max. I live in Oakland, and my question is, you seem to define social realities in terms of their function in society, so in the ways that people respond to them, but there's another way to think about them would be the way people have these constructs in their minds. So do you think there is an ontological definition for each particular social reality, or are they relative to each human and how he or she understands them?
Well, the structure that I'm describing is one where you got to have more than one person to create a social reality. If I decide tomorrow that I'm going to create my own nation state because I'm sick of this one, it's not going to make any difference. You have to get cooperation with other people. Now, within the cooperative unit, there will be various forms of disagreement and conflict, and that's why we have mechanisms for resolving the conflict. We have criminal and civil courts for resolving all sorts of contexts within the institutional structure. But the basic idea remains the same, and that is we create social realities on social realities. So we create citizenship, and then on top of citizenship you have a political identification. You can be a Republican or a Democrat, and then on top of that we create electoral offices. You can run for office and become elected or not elected, as the case might be. So you're never just a part of a single social entity, but you're a part of a vast interlocking set of structures of social entities, and they're not fixed forever. They're constantly subject to reevaluation and change.
On that note, John, I'm going to thank you for joining us. This has been a fascinating conversation. I feel like we've just scratched the surface.
We have just cracked it.
So thanks for joining us. Our guest has been Professor John Searle from the University of California at Berkeley, author of many, many things, but most recently, Making the Social World, The Structure of Human Civilization.
And we also want to thank everyone in our live audience for participating in the program. Give yourself a big round of applause.
So, John Perry, what are your final thoughts about this topic? I mean, this is a huge, complicated topic.
Well, you know, my final thoughts are really about John Searle himself. I became aware of him through an article he wrote in the, mid-1960s, about the time you were born, I suppose, about how to derive an ought from an is. And it was all connected with his work on speech act theory and promising. And I realized after all these years, his career, as diverse as it's been, as multi-topic, as if that's a word, as the books have been, there is a unity to the whole thing. It's this whole idea of creating something out of nothing through language and representation. And so I probably learned something about social reality, but I learned something about John Searle.
Yeah, I really agree about that. I've been working on this book myself called A Natural History of Normativity. It's about similar topics, and I think it's the biggest, most important issue there is, and it does actually unify all sorts of philosophy. I think of it as a theory of the complete human being in nature, right? The human being in the natural world creating the social world, and it's like a fascinating. I wish we had another hour. Well, like I said, we just scratched the surface.
It's fun to be surrounded by philosophers who take on such modest and unambitious projects. You know.
But, this conversation will continue. It's a social reality that will go on beyond this moment. We'll continue on our blog, theblog.philosophytalk.org, where our motto is cogito ergo blogo. I think, therefore I blog. And if you're into wasting time, we have this ever-growing Facebook page, so you can go on there and check it out, too.
And, most exciting of all, you can download podcasts of our program from our website. For the final word, we're going to turn to the social velocity of Ian Scholz, the 60-second philosopher.
Ian Scholz. This past April, Afghan President Hamid Karzai got so frustrated that, according to an unnamed parliamentary source, he threatened, "If you and the international community pressure me more, I swear that I'm going to join the Taliban." As I understand it, Karzai wanted control over the monitoring of Afghani voter fraud. He was angry that the parliament wouldn't give it to him. Certainly he knows something about voter fraud, having won election in 2009 through that phenomenon, at least according to the international community. Regarding his threat to join the Taliban, White House spokesman Robert Gibb told reporters, "On behalf of the American people, we're frustrated with the remarks. As a token member of both the American people and the international community, I don't know if I feel frustrated with those remarks or not." You see, word has trickled down from the inner sanctums of the international community that Karzai is increasingly unstable. Whether that's a real belief or just something floated as an excuse to cut Karzai loose, I don't know. I'm on the fringes of both the international community and the American people. I don't want to secede. I don't own a gun, and I don't like tea. Clearly, I want the terrorists to win. The international community is kind of like an 80s disco. I'm outside waiting for the bouncer to decide if I'm worthy to enter. Once inside, of course, there are further levels. There's the dance floor, the second floor, and finally the secret rooms at the top, to which you are forbidden entry unless you're with Liza Minnelli, or in the international community sense, someone like Angela Merkel. So either Karzai is a corrupt loon or he's not. The international community has its fair share of corrupt loons, but still there's an order to it. South Korea is part of it, but North Korea is not. The Taliban is definitely not part of the international community. Turkey might be if it gets more secular and apologizes or something to Armenia. Iran, if it just gives up on this whole nuclear weapon Holocaust thing never happened, could be invited. Greece is part of it and is proving its worth not only by going bankrupt, by threatening to bring the European Union down with it. Whatever his mental state, Karzai is brave enough. He has to do a dance between people who want him dead, people who want him to turn his back while they sell opium, and the swarms of Western statecrafters and soldiers trying to soothe his ruffled feathers and explain to him why civilian deaths are always unfortunate, yet strangely, always acceptable. But would he actually join the Taliban? Who knows? This could be the equivalent of threatening to hold your breath until you turn blue, or throwing a hissy fit, or even just cutting your losses and leaving the game. Who knows if the Taliban would even want him? Maybe the Taliban has found somebody new. Maybe the Taliban has found closure and wants to get on with its life. Whether Karzai is serious or not, there's something to be said for the Taliban. It's a symbol of a more simple time, when all you needed was a semi-automatic weapon and a grenade launcher. You had your dreams of vengeance, retribution, of hiding in rocks and striking out against the assembled might of a relentless hegemony. On this side of the relentless hegemony, the intention may be to turn Afghanistan into a 21st century international community-approved third-rate Raj, with Puka Sahibs replaced by world-beater bureaucrats with BlackBerries, PowerPoint demonstrations, and tailored suits. There's something to be said for that, but if you're an old warrior, you might just say to yourself, if I see one more spreadsheet, I may just spit. Or join the Taliban. I gotta go.
Philosophy Talk is a presentation of Ben Manila Productions and the trustees of Leland Stanford Junior University, copyright 2010.
Our executive producer is David Demarest. Special thanks to James Spurlock, Chris Meyer, and Michael Grunwald.
Thanks also to Dan Brandon, Zoe Corneli, Merle Kessler, and Corey Goldman.
Our production coordinator is Devin Strolovich, Daniel Elstein, and Ben Hirsch are our directors of research. Leo Weiss is our webmaster.
Support for Philosophy Talk comes from the Stanford Humanities Center, various groups at Stanford University, the Friends of Philosophy Talk,
and from the members of KALW, local public radio, San Francisco, where our program originates.
The views expressed or misexpressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of Stanford University or of our other funders.
The conversation continues on our website, philosophytalk.org.
I'm John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor. Thank you for listening.
And thank you for thinking.
And that's a wrap.